and you walk around with confidence, I think body language, just like in posing, when I teach posing for photos, your body language says a lot about you. And I'm a little more, this is just my style, but when I travel, I like to come off a little bit more intimidating, maybe, where I'll wear like, certain glasses that kind of look like sunglasses, but I'll dress maybe a little bit more less casual than I would, because I do want people to kind of maybe be a little more standoffish. And whether that's right or wrong, that's just my approach. But I would rather carry my shoulders up high, keep my chin up high, and always be looking around like, who are you? All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Tourpreneur Podcast. I'm Christy Hunter, and I'm here with Sandra Beinacht and Samantha Hardcastle. And we are so excited to be talking about women in travel. And one of the specific topics we're going to dive into today is, I think, one that's very important for one that you're going to see on the news a lot and kind of get some bad publicity maybe, but we want to shed some light on how amazing that it can be, and how that women in travel can travel safely as solo travelers or groups. So we're going to talk about safety in travel today, and maybe on a solo version and then a group version as well. I think there's so much we can get into this topic of safety. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit boring from the beginning, but I think we'll realize it's anything but boring. That safety is such an important topic, really should be the number one priority of travel before anything else. So if Sandra, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, my name is Samantha and Sandra. I'm originally from Germany. I traveled initially solo, mainly as a journalist, and then got sucked into the happy industry of travel. Our specialty is one-of-a-kind group experiences, usually for people that already know each other, but then there's always a sister, a friend, somebody else that comes together, or once in a while we have journeys that are for beer lovers, foodies, just on very specific topics. And that's when you get individuals coming together. But I think, speaking about women in safety in travel, I travel a lot. I've traveled my whole life. Growing up in Germany, you were put on trains to go to summer camp on your own. And I've continued that. I've put my own daughter in public transportation. She's 14 now, by herself. So I think, it's education, it's knowing where you're going, but you also need to start at an early age. I think we're in a blessed situation nowadays that we have cell phones with us. And most of us, I think when you travel, the one thing you should never sacrifice is having data available to you. So don't just switch your phones off and like, oh my God, it's $10 a day. No, I think one of the most important safety features that anybody has, but especially women, are our phones, so that we not only know where we're going, thank you Google Maps, if we're not with somebody else who tells us where to go, and often even if we're with somebody else, we want to venture out on our own, that we can also let people know where we're going, that we check in with the people that we have. And I admit, I sometimes forget that, especially when I travel for work. It could be 2-3 days before I tell my family that I'm alive, but they do look at the Instagram story, so they know I'm alive. But yeah, I think like the phone is such a vital feature. And, if you need to save, you can get a local SIM card. Most phones allow you to have both. You don't need to download major things while you're traveling. But I think having a phone and having an active phone connection while traveling is a must.
Definitely. So I want to get back into some of those really practical tips because those were so good right there, what you just said. But I want to hear from Samantha too. And so let's hear Samantha, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a few quick travel tips for safety, and then we're going to get a little deeper into that.
Yeah, Samantha Hardcastle, founder of A More Social and the Storied Experience. I've been working with tour operators at pretty much every kind of tourism experience over the last 10 years. And one thing I spend pretty much all my day doing is learning about travelers and learning about their behaviors. And actually something that I study very intensely is the idea of safety, but not so much safety from a physical standpoint. It's more so safety from a psychological standpoint. And how do we help create moments that encourage people to feel safe on an emotional and psychological level. So I'm looking forward to digging into that a little bit as well. But yeah, as from a physical safety aspect, I think that there's a lot of things we could discuss. Obviously, Sandra brought up a really key point, bringing up the phones. I was just traveling by myself, and there was a notice on the door about something along the lines of women feeling safe to call a number if they're being human trafficking. And that, like, right there was a huge wake-up call for me, like, oh my gosh, like, this is terrifying. So, I think women obviously have this separate issue that men don't have to deal with, which is this physical safety fear of, like, being kidnapped. And, that's I think an extreme idea, but obviously it's a problem. So
yes, absolutely. So yeah, I want to get into that, the psychological parts of it as well. But my name is Christy Hunter, and I am the owner and CEO of Photo Walk Nashville and Photo Walk Your Travel. And we offer photo shoot walking tours in Nashville and Scottsdale. And I'm also an avid traveler myself. Since I was little, been traveling around the world. And I do have 2 teenage daughters and just got back from Europe with one of them. We went for our birthdays together to France and Germany and had a lovely time in Luxembourg. I had a lovely time, but was told, just to kick off with the story here, and then we can get in a little deeper, was told that Luxembourg is a very safe country. I read that online, that this is one of the safest countries you can go to. So that's why we chose that as a destination for she and I. And immediately upon getting there at the train station, a woman approached me and asked me to take her photo on her cell phone, handed me her cell phone with all her credit cards in it, and wanted me to take a picture of her and her baby. She had a baby stroller. And of course, that's what I do. I'm a photographer, and I take pictures of people in tourist destinations. So it didn't come off as surprising at all to me. I was like, oh, sure. Yeah, I'll take your picture. And as I was doing it, I'm realizing, why am I taking a picture of her in a train station? Like, this is weird. And then we got on the train, and my daughter went, where's my backpack? And we realized her backpack was gone, but we didn't realize until, about a few hours later what had happened, that we got scammed, that there was no other way that she set that backpack down, that while I was being distracted, someone else came up behind her, and just 2 snips of a thin backpack in her backpack was gone. And it wouldn't have, everything in there was replaceable except for her inhalers. And she was having asthma, breathing problems. So that sent us into 2 days of having to find a doctor, of making sure that she was healthy and safe. So that's it brought us immediately to the rest of the trip of being aware, and honestly coming to a place of where you're not kind of in that nice mode of like, oh, sure, hi, where you're just talking to strangers, but kind of looking at everyone as if, like, not that you are scared of them, but just where you have some sort of higher awareness. So I'm just kicking off with that story. I'm sure both of you have a lot of stories to tell, but how can we, as travelers ourselves, and to our audience here that's listening, what are some really practical ways that, whether you're traveling domestically or abroad, that we can stay safe?
Wow, that is a intense story. Thankfully, I've never had any issues like that when I travel, but they're pretty much inevitable, I feel like. I mean, if you're ever in any of the travel forums online on Facebook, you'll see these stories just happen every day. And, one of the things that I've seen is, one of the things I've actually purchased is like these dresses that have pockets that are like, internal, so they're safer. Things like that. I mean, there's tons of gadgets and tools out there that do make it a little bit safer. But as you brought up this, like, more of like this internal narrative of like what's going on, like, you need to be constantly hyper vigilant to what's around you. Like, that really inhibits your ability to take a place in, right?
Right.
And it kind of kills the vibe and ruins the experience. And sounds like it really did ruin your first 2 days of your trip.
Yeah.
So, I wish I had the answers. And I guess that's why we're talking today. Sandra, I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, and well, first of all, Christy, yeah, that just sucks. And that shouldn't happen. And, knock on wood here as I stand in a hotel, I've yet to be robbed. But I know it will happen at some point because we all get distracted. However, I forgot to mention what I actually do for a living nowadays. So coming from a journalist background, I am the co-owner and proud founder of Inside Europe Travel Experiences. And so I think, honestly, one of the promises that we give people to what Samantha just said is, yes, we run group tours. And I know nobody wants to be in a group and nobody really wants to go on a standard tour. But at the same time, what I think we can offer as many other small tourpreneurs, as other companies that really focus on the client experience, and it's not just a number, not just another tour, is we give that additional safety. So, by traveling together, by having a tour director, we call them our hosts, by having that safe transportation where you're going from place A to place B, you have a little bit more of a chance to relax. You're not continuously on, especially as moms traveling with kids, where you wonder about everybody and, oh my God, did she have this? Do we have that? Do we have food? Where do we get the inhaler? I think so being part of a group tour, if it's the right kind of a group tour, can take away the stress and that continuous where now we always need to be aware. Don't get me wrong, but it's different because you go on a vacation. You're supposed to relax as well. So it is nice when you then have somebody else like us worry about you and alert you of these situations. And unfortunately, Luxembourg, beautiful country, but that train station is not the greatest. And I'm not saying that to rub it in, Christy, Lord behold, no. But it's just, I think, by partnering with somebody, by having that extra friend that, to just guide you a little bit and make sure that you're aware of where maybe not to go, what maybe not to do. So I think traveling alone is scary. So even wherever I go, I check in with local friends. I talk to the concierges just to make sure, because Google doesn't know it all, and it's got to connect. Yeah.
And as Samantha was saying, different like dresses, clothes. I mean, just from a practical perspective, I know we looked very American and we looked very touristy. We were wearing loud clothing and but also I don't want to change that. I don't want to detract from who I am. I want to travel as myself. Some people told me, oh, you should have dressed down or, looked a little bit differently. I'm still going to be me, right, wherever I'm at. So whether I have, glitter in my hair or a shiny dress on, I'm still going to be who I am in that country. But whatever I'm wearing, maybe I need to take more of the lessons we learned was to also split up your very vital belongings. Like both of her inhalers shouldn't have been in that one backpack. We would have had one somewhere else and another one. Also your credit cards, having their little things you can stick on I've got a little pouch that I hooked on the inside of my bra that carried my very important credit card, and then I had a couple other ones stashed somewhere else. So that if worse, and it may not even be safety, it could be just things getting lost, or even on our own, just losing things. So maybe some different ways that we can just carry our things a little more consciously too.
And then Samantha, I think you were mentioning to listen to your inner voices. So I think that's something that we need to do so much more when we travel than when we're at home. Like if your gut feeling tells you to not walk down that road, then do not walk down that road. And if you're like, you know what, I'm too tired, maybe I shouldn't go out. No, don't go out. So at home, you feel safer, you know how it all works. But when you're alone and when you're traveling, trust your inner voice. And you can't always do it all. You shouldn't do it all. Take care of yourself, because otherwise, not just from a safety perspective, but if you travel like a maniac and cram too much into the day, you might end up getting sick halfway through the trip and then miss out on opportunities. So I think safety is also looking out for your health, staying hydrated. I wish I would drink a lot more water, and I need to. That's just simple things.
Right.
And I know we all don't like the masks, but honestly, if you're feeling a little icky and you're getting on public transportation, you still got it in your purse. Put it on. Yeah.
Well, and even, going out and having drinks, I was in Las Vegas for a rival conference, and I was very conscious of being, not having too much to drink because I was by myself. I'm not going to be in a place where, if you're going out and if I was out in Nashville with my friends, that's very different. And you're not having to drive, but being at a resort or being somewhere, if you're in Mexico or, a Caribbean country where you don't know anyone around, and then you go out and have drinks, you're putting yourself in a position of not being at your highest amount of awareness. Your senses are dulled. That's what alcohol does. So, maybe that's another thing to just keep in mind of if you are going to drink, make sure that you are in a place where you maybe don't need to get a ride back, or you can just walk back to your room, but being ultra aware of that. So, let's get back into the subconscious part and the what goes into our minds when we are experiencing like that feeling of being unsafe. So, Samantha, what if you kind of can get back into that?
Yeah, so there's something we all naturally do. It's called orienting, and orienting is this idea of looking around, scanning the environment for dangers and whatnot. And as you said, like, this can be really hard to do in a new destination where your senses are actually just flooded with new information. But it's about finding those things that do feel safe. And sometimes it can be about, bringing those safe, tangible things from home to help you kind of reorient your body and feel like you're a bit safer than you might, when we're ungrounded, it can, and we're in our heads and we're very chaotic in that energy, it can kind of exacerbate the feeling of unsafeness. And, you hear a lot of women, especially, having panic attacks and, feeling very anxious and overwhelmed when they're traveling. And again, I read just a lot of travel experiences and in like the women who travel groups on Facebook and whatnot. And it's, it often happens in these places where they just don't feel a connection to the local culture or whatever it is. So one thing I would absolutely recommend doing months in advance is read as many books as you can about the culture to familiarize yourself with their behaviors and the things that they do. And this is, I think, really important for hosts and operators, is to give people a crash course in the local culture that they're going to be in.
Mm-hmm.
You should not be like, don't assume that the traveler is doing all of that research on their own. Like, help them, guide them, help them familiarize themselves. That way, when they arrive there, they're not coming in with cold feet. Like, they're not coming in completely blindsided by some of the cultural differences that can make them feel uncomfortable, right?
That's such great advice. And, I always say we have an app for that. But it's not a general app. It's an app that we create for each and every single group. And then within the group, for each and every traveler, we put in personal recommendations. And I will put in different recommendations for a family traveling with kids as a little alert. Hey, as we're going here and there, kids will probably run over there. That's a safe playground. Don't go to the one on the right, no matter how flashy it is. And so I think that's, such an important information to, if you already know, share your knowledge and repeat it. And, we make Google Map lists, for examples, with places that are curated, and people can still decide on their own where they want to go. But if you're traveling with me and you're like, I really, really want to eat out tonight. Well, here's 5 restaurants where I know you will be safe. Right. Yes, something out of the freak that happens that nobody can control. So giving that extra value, sharing your knowledge, sharing your experiences. Now, not everybody reads what you give them. Not everybody listens when you talk. So it's also repetitiveness is really important. And I have to say, what's other really important, and it actually will affect me in like 30 seconds or so, is keep your devices charged. So I will be right back with my cable because my laptop, unfortunately, is not fully charged. And I think that's something else. Like, as you transfer from one destination to another, you might get stuck on a train that doesn't have power cable. So bring a power bank. Being connected is great, but also having the right juice for your devices is really, really important.
Absolutely. And you don't know that the place that you're in will have a place to even go buy it. I mean, in Luxembourg, we had we lost a power cord and did not have a place to go buy it. There was not just like a corner store. So you never know. I mean, unless you are just in somewhere like New York City where there's everything at your fingertips disposable. But, I think that that's such a key thing, is to be prepared physically with the things that you're going to need to charge as well. And as for myself as a tour operator, I know, back to Sandra's point about our responsibility as tour operators and women in the travel industry, voices like Samantha, to let people know, whether that's through blogs, whether it's through guides, or just on the ground. I know when I have a group of bachelorette party girls, I'll usually ask them what their plans are, what they're doing that night during our photo shoot time. And I will usually give them a little bit of I feel like kind of a mom to them, but I will say, like, y'all be careful on Broadway. Watch your phones. Don't have your phone out in a pocket or just, set it on it. Be aware, because I've heard stories of, yes, people steal phones on Broadway. Yes, girls can get trafficked in Nashville. That is a real thing. Like, please don't get so drunk that you are unaware of who you are and where you're at, because then you put yourself in the position of being a prime target. It's one thing to be standing in a public place and something happens to you and that is completely out of your control. But if you have the ability to control it, then take those steps to ensure that you are going to be safe. And being drunk in public is sadly, it's a very unsafe thing to do.
Yeah. And rely on local resources. Get a guide. If you want to go on a pub crawl, go on a pub crawl, but then go on a pub crawl with another group where you're safely taken care of, where, somebody is your designated driver. And I think that brings us again to those tour companies that can help and assist in keeping travelers safe, as long as they really want to,
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Samantha, I want to talk to you a little bit more about how to just give us some more practical tips on when you're traveling, either solo or in a group, and some of the mindset behind that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's this right now, the time that we're traveling in, we're coming off of 2 years of feeling very unsafe. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people. Like, our physical safety was severely challenged with COVID. And our bodies, I don't believe that our bodies still feel safe. I think, after 2 years of fearing leaving the house in fear of your life, that can take a huge toll on your nervous system. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of people, like myself included, we were all like, oh, we got to get out of the house. I want to go travel. It's been so long. I need to travel. And then we go out and we travel and we're like, oh gosh, like, this is disorienting. I don't know how to behave in public. Like, my body, your mind says one thing, like, oh, I need to travel. And your body's like, oh gosh, like, all these noises, it's intense, it's scary. So I would say one of the most important things is, and, some people might disagree, but getting back into travel, like, not diving right into, like, one of the noisiest cities in the world, right? Like, easing your way back into it with quieter destinations and places that feel good to your nervous system, to really step into that and say, okay, this is a safe place for me. And, like, for me, that's what I did when I traveled. Like, I went back to places that I already knew that I was comfortable, that were really nourishing for me. And I still feel really uncomfortable in the cities, which is fine because I live in a very quiet place. But I think if you are operating in a city and you do you have to really do a lot of work with your clients, especially the ones that, maybe really did feel the tolls of the last 2 years, helping them find whatever safety cues that they can. And a lot of times, again, that's, loud noises can be very discombobulating for people. You just really have to put yourself in the shoes and say, okay, what really throws people off? Crowds. I mean, I can't do crowds. I can't. So I will not go to the really big attractions because I know that my nervous system can't handle it. So if you do not have, if that doesn't resonate with you, if you're not someone who, like, if you're someone who's like, oh, I love crowds, oh, I love, loud noises, all that, then you don't understand what it's like to be someone who is on the opposite side of that spectrum.
Mhm.
And it's really in your best interest to talk to people who have trouble with that. Talk to people so you can understand, so that you can begin to infuse your experience with maybe moments of quiet, right? Or like ease people into that. And yeah, I mean, I know it's really hard concept for some people to grasp, but it's really important that, like, from a physical standpoint, like, someone's body can be at ease, because if your body isn't at ease in an experience, like if you're tensed up and you're bracing for something, and because maybe you just got off a 9-hour flight and you're exhausted and you've been dealing with bumbling around from one place to another, and like you still have a lot of that tension in your body, you cannot feel safe in that moment.
Right.
And if you can't feel safe, then you really can't take in what all of the amazing things a destination has to offer. So safety really is the number one as you said at the beginning, Christy, it is the number one fundamental thing that we need to establish before anything happens in an experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think before setting foot on the plane, you need to really have taken time to understand your destination. And even if it is domestic, just to refresh yourself on, look up some scams that are happening now. If I would have taken the time to look up a little more deeper, maybe I would have realized, hey, that's a popular scam happening right now, is a woman with a baby coming up and asking you to take their photo. And, as even when I have my guests on my tour, I'll let them know, it's probably not a great idea to hand your phone to someone to let them take a photo, because that's another scam, is that someone will offer, oh, let me take your photo for you at this mural. And while they're in there, they are getting into your phone. They're hacking in. So, just keeping your belongings. Also, they could run off with your phone. Like that's something too that we don't think about, that can easily happen. If you hand your phone over to someone to take a photo, they could disappear in a second. So, maybe doing things like Sandra was saying, where you are going with a guide, doing a professional photo shoot where have a recommended and validated resource, a guide who's going to be taking care of you during that. And you don't have to worry about your phone getting hijacked or run off. So I think those are some key points of, first of all, doing your research, staying in on the top of scam trends and just knowing the area, and then taking practical ways through your clothing, your packing habits as well. And some of these newer, cooler inventions, or little things like, the things that you can snap on inside of your clothes to have layers. And then also doing group tours or experiences and sticking with folks from that area that are guides. And then one more thing I thought about is always knowing the emergency number in a country that you're not familiar with. I realized that in France, I did not know the 911 of France, and I realized like how just naive that was of me. And even as a seasoned traveler, why did I go in and not know what the emergency numbers was of that country?
Yeah, there's so many things we don't think about. Mm-hmm. We take our safety for granted because
we do.
Most of the days we're in a safe place. And
right.
Yeah.
But I like what you're saying too, as far as like, you don't want that to be the whole tone of your trip, and you don't want to be walking around with this, like, there's got to be a place of kind of in the middle where you're hyper aware, but then you're also able to relax and have fun and take photos, or do that attraction, or do that even just in the mundane times. I mean, to me, the challenges are the adventure. So when you're sitting on the train station, those moments when you're talking to your significant other, or your child, or your friend, whoever you're with, those are the moments. And so you don't want to be, and I think too, that when you walk around in fear, you are, like Samantha said, like, you're projecting that out, and people can sense that vibration. So when you walk around with confidence, I think body language, just like in posing, when I teach posing for photos, your body language says a lot about you. And I'm a little more, this is just my style, but when I travel, I like to come off a little bit more intimidating, maybe, where I'll wear like, certain glasses that kind of look like sunglasses, but I'll dress maybe a little bit more less casual than I would, because I do want people to kind of maybe be a little more standoffish. And whether that's right or wrong, that's just my approach. But I would rather carry my shoulders up high, keep my chin up high, and always be looking around like, who are you? Rather than, kind of being back and with, I think if you're always also too hovered over your phone, you're making yourself a prime target. But I think that lack of confidence, or maybe walking around in that fear, how does your body language project that? Is that a key thing, Samantha?
Oh, yeah. And I think you've hit on a really key point is, as tour guides and leaders, you really set the tone for the people on your tour. So if you can role model the right way to behave within your destination, your guests are going to mirror that. Like, it's just natural for you to mirror the people that you're around. So I would say that if you feel really confident, your guests are going to feel really confident. And that's something that that's one thing you can control within your tour.
Mm-hmm. And I think from a personal perspective, what you should do now more so than ever is also plan ahead. So don't just, land somewhere and I'm like, oh, I'm going to find a hotel. Oh, I'm going to get on a train. No, I mean, travel is back. It's back with a vengeance. And at the same time, resources are much more limited. So you may not be able to get on a train from Rome to Venice, which, years ago you could just book. Now that train could be full, and then you're stuck in the city at night in the train station. So, we all love serendipity, and you should leave room for serendipity at all times. But safety, especially for women travelers, is to also know where you're going to sleep and how you're going to get from point A to point B, especially if you're on your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so good. Well, y'all, this has just been another incredible conversation with the two of you. And I think there's so much we could get in so much deeper into so many of these little subtopics. But I think that all three of us would agree we want other tour operators to, be able to pass on this information on their tours, whether it's in pre-messaging, guides, and then of course in person when we do have guests in front of us, and then just as us and as women traveling around, of being hyper aware, but also still enjoying. And like Sandra said, like, travel's back. We know we're going to be, I mean, my calendar is getting booked up for 2023 and I'm so excited, and I hope that y'all's are as well. But we do want to be in this last trip that I had to Europe really gave me some wake-up calls of ways that it didn't deter me. It didn't make me not want to go back, but it just made me more aware and more prepared for my next trip. So I hope that's something that we can be able to, that's a continual conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bon voyage to everybody. Gute Reise. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys. And this has been another incredible episode of the Tourpreneur podcast. Thanks for joining us.